Fate points are rerolls. So if at any point in time in the game you need a reroll, you can reroll those dice if you really get into that pinch. Ooh, look at that, 99. Yeah! All right. Okay, man, wish that was on a weapon or an armor drop.
Join the team.
You can see, what's that? A candle? I don't know. I don't even know why we got it here. It's not even lit. You forgot to light it. Nice work. Hey team, this is the McGuire Review, and today we're going to be taking a look at something that has been out for a little while for free print-to-play, and now there is a new version out that you can get in PDF as well as paper and hardback, and it's called D100 Dungeon by Martin Knight. Let's lock in and get ready to go. All right, D100 Dungeon by Martin Knight is a it's your classic RPG. It's kind of like a D&D feel. It definitely scratches that itch. It's kind of a game in its own. I mean, it's totally a pen and paper. You're gonna need a few things to be able to play this game. It's not like a board game. A lot of these things that you see here do not come with the game. These are all things that I use to kind of enhance the feel and the play of the game, and we'll go through why I have these things on the table and how I use them. But D100, essentially, if you want to get it, and I do highly recommend this, is a book. It's a paperback, it's a hardback, if you want to go with that version, or you can get the PDF, which I have done here on my iPad, and we're going to go through that. I like the PDF version because I can very quickly jump to the tables that I need when I do rolls to determine what happens when I'm in the dungeon. And something else I'll say about this type of game, because a lot of these, the way they're designed, you'll get these books, they're big, thick books, they've got tons of rules, tons of tables. Martin did a really nice job with this particular game in being able to give you that feel of that pen and paper RPG dungeon crawl, but the book is pretty short. There's not too many tables, and it's pretty easy when it comes to the rules. They're all just kind of, obvious rules of how things would play out and how things would happen as you go through the dungeon. There's nothing that gets too complex when it gets to, combat or searching or anything like that. It's pretty simplistic in the way that it works. I think the character sheet is designed very well that you'll use when you play the game, and we'll kind of go through each one of these. And Bear will get some overhead video on some of this stuff as we're talking about it, so you'll be able to see that as well a little bit closer. We do have a map here. I am currently, which quest am I on? Quest 73 to 74. That just happened to be the quest that I rolled. There are a certain number of quests in this game. They're all here on the back of this sheet that you'll go through. There are 5 initial quests that you'll start off with, kind of your intro, tutorial type quests, where you'll be able to learn about the game a little bit better, gear up a little bit easier when it comes to the encounter modifier. That's a thing in this game that helps some of the quests sort of modify how hard the encounters are when you get into certain types of rooms, particularly red rooms where encounters are going to take place, or if you happen to run into a roaming monster that just might be walking around the dungeon. That's going to be taken care of with our little time track down here. It's a really neat mechanic, and that will be modified over the course of the game with something called an encounter modifier. And again, those will start making it a lot easier in the beginning, and then as you go through the dungeon, you gear up, and you get better gear, and you get better spells, and you're able to fight more effectively. Then those modifiers are going to add to the difficulty of the game and or take away a little bit. So let's get into the book here. So I'll pull up my iPad, and I'll go in, and you can see here that I do have the PDF here, and you can see the rules that you would go through for the game. And that's going to be just, we'll see how many pages that actually is. So the core, pretty much all the rules and explaining how to play the game would be 31 pages. Now, that does include tons of graphics and examples as well. When you get into just the actual rules of what you need to be able to get started and play, it's fairly compressed. It's much shorter than that, and it's a pretty quick read, I would say, to be able to go through and read those rules. So here's a page here. You can see nice spacing along those texts, as well as images that you'll find, color and black and white, throughout the PDF, which is pretty cool. And then you do have the ability to very quickly get to all the tables. And that's why I love the PDF version, is here's all the tables here, if you can see that. And I can very quickly just click one and go right to the table, roll the dice, and see then what the result is. And that's how this game is going to work. Depending on what you're doing within the various different rooms, you're going to roll dice depending on what type of room it is, and you'll go right to the table that you need. So we'll actually play a little bit just to show how that actually works. But first I want to show you what we've got here on the table. Obviously this is the map. There are 3 different colored types of rooms. You'll see there are yellow rooms, there are blue rooms, 4. There are green rooms, and there are red rooms. Now yellow rooms are just going to be a standard type of room. You can search in any type of room, but green, blue, and red are actually going to provide a little bit of a bonus to that search, where yellow will not. The blue room is going to be a room that provides the most bonus for searching, and that's a really good room to search in. It's a plus 20 to whatever you roll. Yellow would be plus nothing. The green rooms are very interesting. Those are geographic rooms, so when you go into those rooms, you'll go to your dice. You'll need a set of percentile dice. One of them has the 10 through 00 on it, and one of them is a standard D10. They're called percentile dice. You'll roll that to see what you get, and I rolled a 52 here. So if I went into this green room, I would roll my dice. I would then go right to my tables. I'd click geographic, and I would find 52. And we'll just go ahead and find that, and it says that it's a lever room. So it says, in the secluded part of the dungeon, the adventurer finds a lever protruding from the wall. Ooh, bear, lever from the wall. The lever can be pulled, optionally, by rolling 1d10 on the table below. Add lever G52 to the dungeon room. So you'll write on that dungeon lever G52, and then it says mark it with a check mark if you decide to actually pull that lever and do something with it. So you have a choice as a player, and this was just an example. There's lots of things we can run into in geographic green rooms. But with our example here of the lever, we can now as a player decide, do I want to grab a d10 and roll and pull that lever? Because, if I roll 1 through 3, nothing happens. If I roll a 4 through 10, after it is pulled, a far-off rumble can be heard. Shade 1 pip on the lever track. So here on the character sheet, there are keys and levers that you can acquire over the course of dungeon crawling, trying to, complete your objective, and every quest has different objectives. And as you find keys and levers, you'll just shade in those pips, and then whenever you run into a door where, hey, you can use a key, or a chest, you can use a key, or a lever on a door, you would roll a d10. If you ever got a number that was less than or equal to how many pips you had shaded in, then that object would open. If you did not, then it didn't work, and then you'd have to go about trying to open that object by taking some type of a test, whether it was a dexterity test or a strength test. These types of games, if you play these types of games, all of this will feel very familiar. If you do not, trust me, this is the one to gateway into. And I'll say that because it is, I would say, one of the more simpler versions of a game like this. And I love the fact of how Martin did the rule set. It's advanced just enough, but not too advanced where you get so bogged down in rules that you're constantly looking stuff up. The game, once you learn how to play, flows very easily and quickly, and you're really caught up in the fun of rolling dice and seeing what happens and what do you encounter more than you're going back to rule sets. Now, you're always going to be going back to the tables. I don't find myself ever going back and reviewing rules. It was pretty much a one read. There was a few things I checked the first couple quests, and then that was it. And the rules really are that simple. It's mainly going to be going back and hitting all these different tables, much like we just did there, because that's really what drives the core gameplay of D100 Dungeon. So that's the different rooms. Now there are going to be the red rooms as well. The red rooms are called encounter rooms. They have a plus 10 for search. Green are plus 5 for search, and blue are plus 20. If you do want to search in those rooms, you do get a benefit. The red rooms are where encounters are going to automatically trigger. So whenever you enter a red room, you are going to go ahead and roll your percentile dice. I use my Elderwood Academy dice tower here and scroll bottom. I really love this unit, so that's what I actually use when I want to do this. And every roll that I would do, like if I was to do a test or if I was to do an attack, I'll roll the die just thematically and for fun. If it's anything that would come from the game or from the dungeon, from a monster, anything like that, I'm going to roll those dice with the dice tower and just leave it to the fate of the dice tower in the dungeon to see what I actually get. So that's what I would do there if I wanted to go into a red room and I had an encounter. I'd roll the dice and I would see that I got a 64, and then what I would do is I would look on my encounter modifier, because that is an encounter and it says plus 10. So I would add 10 to that, making it 74, and then I would go to my I would go right here to my encounter table and I would look up, well, what's 74? Okay, that is an orc champion for that encounter. And for an orc champion, they have an AV of 55. So every character as well as monster will have something called an AV value. And what that means is, for the orc champion, it's 55. So whenever they go to hit me and they roll their percentile dice, they have to have less than 55. If they're over 55, it's a miss. That's one of the things that happens in combat, is can they actually hit you? And then if they can, then they've got a couple other modifiers here for this orc champion. It says that they have 5 defense, they have plus 2 damage, and 16 hit points. And then there's a like a kill reward that you'll get. And this one says table I, which is items, or armor plus 15, or weapons plus 15. So as a player, if you were able to defeat that orc champion, you would then be able to choose, do I want to get something from items, which could be some cool items that you might need? Do I want to go and get a piece of armor or a weapon? And I would get plus 15 to whatever I rolled as a bonus. Then the last column here for any type of encounter or monster is their ability. And not every one of them have an ability, but the orc champion does not have ability, actually. That is one that does not have an ability, and that's probably because they've got a really high AV, good defense, and a decent hit point on there for 16. So that's going to be pretty difficult to be able just to fight and defeat that monster. But I have seen, as you go further down that chart, the higher you roll, the harder these encounters and monsters get. But again, it is random, and you do have to add in your encounter modifier there, which sometimes it's plus and sometimes it's negative, depending on how difficult that quest is that you're actually doing. So those are the rooms. Once you get into a room, you would just decide, do I want to search? And if you do, you'd write a little S down in the corner. I like to do mine in this orange colored pencil here, just so I can kind of see it on all the colors. And we'll put an S there and says you've searched that room. You can decide to leave a room and come back and search later if you want to. That's up to you. I usually search while I'm there, and you definitely want to search usually in rooms that do give you that bonus, especially those blues. I don't do a lot of searching in yellow rooms because there is no bonus unless my HP is in a good spot and everything is going really well. And I say that because searching isn't always good. You usually will find cool stuff when you search, but it generally will take time. And in this game, there is a time tracker that's right down here, and you have to shade in little clock faces every time you basically take a turn, and every time the game tells you that you have to do that. Sometimes it's because you fail a test, like you're trying to pick a lock and you fail, so it takes too long. Sorry, you got to shade in some time. Or you're trying to search and you just don't get a good roll. You may have to use some time, so you'll want to watch that time track, because as you go along that time track here, there are some load up the overhead video. There are some very small things on this time track here that will have like a little oil symbol, will have a little dagger with a number, and we'll have a little plate that looks like a little plate of food with a fork and a knife. Every time you get to the very end of your time track, you're going to use food. You run out of food, there's a problem. As you move through, every time you hit one that has a little oil symbol, you got to use a little bit of oil. You run out of oil, you're in darkness, you have a negative 20 modifier, not good. You definitely want to stock up in the stores and buy yourself some flasks of oil before you go out as an adventurer, and have that on hand so you can use that as you're in the dungeon if you need it. And every time you hit one of the little daggers with a number, that's your roaming monster. So what you're going to do is you're going to roll that d10. If that number ever comes up, I rolled a 1, so that definitely would have been a roaming monster. If the number ever comes up less than or equal to the number that's shown on the time tracker, and that will change. The first one is 4, second one is 5, third one is 6. Then a roaming monster will come out. You'll just pick up your percentile die. You'll go right back to your encounter table. You'll roll your percentile dice, or the dungeon will roll those percentile dice. Oof, man, that sounds good. And you will then come up with a result. You'll add your modifier to it for your encounter right there on your sheet for that quest. you'll grab your monster and you'll start to encounter that monster. So let me show you how combat works, because we've gone over most of the rules already for the game. Now, when you leave a map, you will obviously pull out a new map and draw those. So we'll just go ahead and look at what combat would be. So let's say, for instance, I'd have to fight. We'll just pick something here. We'll pick giant bats. So giant bats have an AV of 25, so they have to roll less than 25 to be able to hit. Defense of 0, a damage -3. They're not too great. And there's a few of them. One of them has 2 health, and the other 2 have 3 health. They give me a reward from table P4, which would be a part, like a monster part. And they have a few monster abilities. They can fly, they have surprise, and they have pack. Now, pack can be very dangerous, because pack essentially says every monster past the first one that's still alive, they get +5 AV. So it becomes easier for them to hit you. So you want to kill them as quickly as possible if anything that you fight has pack. Fly, now, that is going to be a monster ability I'm going to have to look up right here. And I do have these sheets. These are things that you can print out when you do get the game. I'm going to go through everything that we have here. But these two, one of them is called the handy sheet. And this sheet will show you when you roll the die, you always, when you go for damage, you roll 2 dice. You roll a d6, which is how much damage you're going to do, and you roll a d10, which is where do you hit them. And depending on where you hit them, and it stays static, it's always the same. It's not something that constantly changes with every single monster. That may give you a damage modifier. So if I was to ever hit them on 1, 2, or 3, which is the head, back, or torso, I could add more damage. If I ever hit them in the legs or the feet, I lose 1 damage. And that's the same for me as well as a player. And then on the top, every time you go into a combat round, you'll roll a d10, and it will tell you how the monster is going to react for that round. And that becomes very important, because really what this mechanic does is it allows the monster to have a chance to escape. And that can get difficult sometimes, because let's say you've been working on a monster for a long time, and all of a sudden they roll something that allows them, it's like, hey, next round they're going to escape. You have to block them, or you have to kill them in that round, or they could potentially escape, and that may be something that you need for a quest. So that's what it adds some tenseness to the actual combat. It's not just roll, 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 roll. Every round the monster is going to be having this certain type of action that they're going to be taking for that combat round. And I really like that. It's then going to vary, and I printed this off at 70%, because I'm going to cut these out. I just like to have them a little bit smaller. That way they're just easier to travel with. But I do have a below here, it's got the combat rounds, and this all comes, you can get this right on BoardGameGeek.com. It's available to print. I believe on Martin Knight's site you can print this off as well. But you got your combat rounds, lists exactly what would happen in a combat, and then you've got a few different actions that you would do during combat, which primarily you can escape a combat as a player if you wanted to. You can block a monster from escaping, tells you exactly what that test is right there and how to do that. And they're very easy the way that they work. And then you got your turns, as well as if you want to cast spells. So my character here, every character is able to cast spells, and I have a spell book. I really like the way the spell book works as well. You got to fill it up before you can start moving things around. And as you add those spells, depending on the order that they get added, they will have a bonus that runs along the side here as well, which is really cool. And I got lucky and got Clone. That was the first spell that I got, which is actually a really, really powerful spell. I love Clone. And I have it on the +20 bonus, which is when I cast that spell, you always have to do a check to make sure that you're able to successfully cast it. If you mess up, then you get cursed, which could kind of suck. But there is an HP value that you have to pay as well to cast any spell. And that's just the way this game works. So if I was to cast Clone, I would pay 3 hit points to be able to do that, and then I would roll to see if I was successful in getting the cast of Clone. Usually that's always going to be a success for me because I got +20, and I cast per my intelligence, In this game, you have 3 main attributes: strength, dexterity, and intelligence. And that's another thing that helps simplify this game, is a lot of the things that you would normally see in games like this. You'd have 7, 8 different types of attributes. You'd have multiple different types of armor sets. You'd have, tons and tons and tons of skills. In this game, you only have 10 skills that you can get and level up. You only have 3 main attributes that you will have and you will level up over the course of the game. Anytime you have to do a check on any of those skills and you roll 10 or less, you then can shade in some of these pips, and after you shade them all in, you erase them, and +5, right? So you can kind of keep leveling up. I've got my strength almost maxed out because these attributes can only max out to 80. My strength's at 72, so that's really good. I've gotten lucky on a lot of checks towards strength, and I've been able to almost max that out. These skills down here can only max out at 20. I have most of them at 5, and I have a couple of them at 10, so they're not too far along just yet. And that's how that's going to work. There's a lot of different things on this sheet, and we'll kind of go through them as we talk through and we do a little play here. So that's how this sheet is going to work. That's very easy there. And then we've got the monster abilities, which are right here. Those are all the different types of monster abilities that are available in this game. Not too many, as you can see there, which is, again, good. It's not overly complex. And we're going to look here at fly, because these, what was I fighting again? Were they bats? Let's look here. We were fighting giant bats. These giant bats do have fly, surprise, and pack. We talked about pack. Now, fly is an adventurer fighting a flying monster, suffers -10 strength when making an attack roll. But if using a ranged weapon, which uses dexterity, it has no effect. Now, I don't use very many ranged weapons because I am a human warrior, but I also have magic abilities. That's my type of character. And all of that will be defined at the beginning of the game. When you start this game, you're going to go through a series of dice rolls that are going to determine, are you human, are you elf, dwarf, are you a warrior, are you a sorcerer, all the different types of things that you can be in this game. Again, there's not too many. It keeps it fairly simple and straightforward. You're then going to name yourself. You're going to roll for what attributes and skills you have attunement to, where you would be better at. You'll shade that in. Just gives you a little bit more pips that you shade in if you're able to successfully get checks with what you're attuned to, which is cool. You're also going to get a couple abilities. I have Mighty Blow. During combat damage rolls of 6, roll again and add to the roll. So that can just be it's almost like critting, right? Where you just, that's a skill that I have. And I got to remember that, because now that I'm saying that, I don't always do that when I'm playing. It's something I got to remember. And then I'm also a spellcaster. Can now use spells from the spell book, which means I can just go ahead and immediately start to use spells, because I do have enough intelligence. You need at least 50 intelligence to start to use spells, and I did start the game with exactly 50. I now have 51 because I have killed enough monsters to get some bonuses. That's how that works. The only other thing that we're going to see in the front here that we haven't talked about is our poison and disease. It works the same way as our keys and levers. If you ever are poisoned or diseased, once you refresh your time track, where it means you've gone through 12 hours, you erase them, you're ready for another 12 hours, you then would roll d10s. If you ever get anything that's less than or equal to how many pips you have shaded, you then will take HP damage. We will see here in the middle, this is where we store all of our armor and items, and you'll just write it right in there where it goes. You'll start the game with a certain amount, and then you will find armor and item as you loot the dungeon and as you battle and fight monsters, and those monsters drop random loot. All of these things you see right here are just the attributes. You get some extra damage. What's it worth in gold pieces? There's a fixed value, which means when you go to the market at the end of the quest, how much will it cost to get that item repaired? And then there is a armor value, which will naturally block incoming damage. This game also has a defense value damage blocker as well, where if you have a certain amount of defense, the damage that's rolled has to actually get through that on top of your armor. I don't have any items that offer that just yet because I've only played about 6 quests, and I just haven't happened to get any items that do have that. And I'll say, even with 6 quests, that has been a significant portion of gameplay, and the reason to that is there are objectives you have to accomplish, and it might be you have to loot 2 monster parts from monsters that are a certain level or above. That's what my current quest is. You have to pick up 3 different types of armor. You have to pick up a few different types of weapons. It may take some time to do that depending on the types of dungeons you get, the encounters you run into, the rolls that come down. It's really difficult to put a time on each one of these quests of, every quest is going to take you about 30 minutes or about an hour. It's really hard to do that because you really don't know what you're going to run into because it is completely random every single time you go into a different area based on those die rolls. But, if you're into these types of games, that's fun. You can always just kind of put everything together and start the session up again. It's very easy. You only have a few pieces of paper. You sit down a couple days later and you continue your quest. Very, very simple. Here's something that I printed off online, and this is not anything that comes with the game. It's an extended monster sheet. It's made by another gentleman. It has a lot of different types of monsters on it that are more than what's in the base game, as well as some abilities that are slightly modified. Nothing against this. It adds another layer of fun to the game. I don't personally use it, and the reason is because I feel like some of these abilities here imbalance the game. It makes some things easier than I think what was naturally designed into the game that you would be challenged with and you would be running into. There are some things I feel like it just gives it makes it a little more easy. It also makes the quest play out a little bit faster because it gives the player more option, and there's a lot more loot that you can get from those monsters than what you would naturally get from what's based in the game. That's just my opinion. I know a lot of people that use this and have a lot of fun with it. I just don't use it for my game because I want to experience this in the pure form that Mr. Knight designed it to be. So that's how I play the game. This is the D100 combat track. This is where you're going to be writing down all the monsters and those values that we went over just a second ago. Where you're going to be writing those down on this sheet as you go down. And you'll see along this side here, every so often when you fight a monster, and it's random, it's just, hey, it's the next row and there's a monster that I'm going to be fighting. If you're able to defeat them, you will get little bonuses over the course of time as you go through this. And once you're done with this sheet, and I only have one more spot here, then you would, put this, save it, and you would get you another one of these sheets and then start at the very top again. And that's just kind of a fun little mechanic where every so often when you're fighting monsters, not only you're going to get the loot that they're going to drop and you're going to get to interact with, you're also possibly going to get a little extra bonus as you play. And these are nice because you'll get gold, +5 to any skill. You'll get +1 to each one of your primary attributes as you go through those. And then here at the bottom is something where you'll get rep, fate, and life. You start off with 3 lives in this game. It is rogue style. Once you do die those 3 times, your character is dead, and you would effectively have to start over. So you want to manage your character's HP as well as those life points and try to get as many of those as you possibly can. Maybe even pick up a scroll of resurrection if you got enough money to have that on hand to make sure that you don't burn through those lives. It would really suck if Jasko Etherblade, name of my character, took a fall in one of these dungeons after I've been playing for quite a few hours now with this character, and I'm sure I'll be well more invested as I continue to go through these quests. So Jasko, will want to keep him alive. Fate points are rerolls. So if at any point in time in the game you need a reroll, you can reroll those dice if you really get into that pinch. Ooh, look at that, 99. Yeah! All right. Okay, man, wish that was on a weapon or an armor drop. And then you will have your reputation points as well, and that can't go any higher than 10. There are maxes for each one of these values. They'll be explained in the rules, but you do have a reputation. That really comes in when you're in the markets. That will dictate how many times and how many different things you can roll on tables with, because there will be things available to you in the market, and the higher your rep, the more rolls and the more things you'll be able to roll on. That's really where that comes into play. Okay, so let's go back to our giant bats here because we got a little bit sidetracked on going through the rest of these things, but I feel like I really want to talk through these things as we're encountering them so they kind of tie together and make sense. Now, before you're going to play, this is definitely not a throw the rules aside and just watch this video and play, but this video should give you a good feel for the mechanics and essentially how these things are going to work. You'll still want to give yourself a read through the quick rule book here. So giant bats, we're actually going to fight those giant bats and I'm going to use these little guys here. Again, this is all my stuff that I add into the game just to enhance. So we'll just say that giant bat is right there, and we're fighting 3 giant bats. I only have 2, so we'll put 2 there. 3 giant bats. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to get our handy sheet, and that's always going to be something you'll want to have available to you right in the beginning here. And anytime you do a battle with a monster, first thing is we're going to roll a d10 to determine what are these guys going to do. Okay, so we'll roll that, and they got a 9. And a 9 says monster damage last round, it will escape. Well, it wasn't damaged last round because it's the first round, so we're good to go. Now they have surprise, so we're going to have to do a surprise test. We'll go here to, and I would have written that down if that was real. That would have been written down on my sheet here. But again, it's just an example. Surprise is an intelligence test -10. If I succeed, they don't surprise me. If I fail, the monster gets a free attack, and I also can use the skill Aware if I have that. Well, look at my sheet here, and I see, I do have Aware, +5, and it was an intelligence attack. I would go intelligence, 51 -10 is 41, +5 is 46. So I'm going to roll these, and I will roll them to see if I was surprised or not. And I rolled a 32, which is less than 46, which means they don't get a surprise attack. We know that they rolled a 9 for how they're going to react for this round, and they're not going to go anywhere. So the first thing is I'm going to get an attack. Now, combat is simultaneous, so even if I was to attack them and get a big hit and kill them completely, they still will get to do an attack roll. It's like simultaneous combat. So I'm going to roll. Now, I got a 80. Not good for me because I would have had to roll less than 72, which is my strength value. I rolled 80. That's a bust. I whiffed. I could not hit them. Now they will get to attack, and they will roll. And they rolled a 4. That's definitely a hit because it's got to be less than base of 25. Again, they got pack, and there's 3 of them, so second and third one are going to get +5 each. Their AV is actually 35, so it has to be less than 35 at this point. And they rolled a 4. So they hit me. Now we will take what the damage die and where did they hit me. We'll put that in. And we got a 6 and a 3. So we'll go here and we'll see 6. Okay, they hit me in the main hand. And they did 3 damage. Do they get any damage modifiers? Well, giant bats have a -3 of damage. So they actually didn't do any damage at all. I didn't even need to take any damage on my armor or block any damage because they rolled a 3. Okay, they're not so good. So now what we're going to do is we're going to see what happens. We're starting another round of combat. 7. 7 says monster will attack as normal. I then will take my attack. Come on, less than 72. 90. Another swing and a miss. All right, they now will attack. What did they get? 27. These guys are on fire, giant bats. All right, they will roll 8 and 2. They hit me in spot 8, which is the belt. Now, whenever I get hit in the belt, I have to do something called a belt check. There are things that you can carry in your belt. What happens is I got to roll a d10, and if I get the number that comes up and there's something in that spot, it's destroyed. Now, the only thing that I have in my belt is a brew of strength, and it's strength +10. I do not want that to get destroyed. And if it does get destroyed on this example, I'm not going to actually destroy it because this is just an example. You heard it, you saw it. We're going to roll this. 4. All right, there's nothing in 4, so nothing happens. All right, still, it hits me in the belt, so I'll look here. Now, I do have the plate mail girdle on, which is really good. It blocks up to 4 damage. They did 2 damage, -3 on their damage. They really got to have a high hit. Again, these are a very, very low-end kind of monster to be able to do some damage, and I'm already kind of beefed up. These guys aren't going to be able to touch me, all right? We might even be able to kill them all in one hit if we get a big hit. All right, that's going to be their turn, and nothing's going to happen. So now we're going to see what happens to them. 7, we already just saw a 7. They will attack as normal. I get my hit. Come on now. 20. All right, that's a hit. Now, how much damage did I do, and where did I hit him? Ooh, I critted. Perfect, because I've got Mighty Blow. So I hit him in 4. We see 4 is the arms. There's no modifier for that, but I did get the Mighty Blow, which means I get to roll this die again and add to the roll. So it's a 6 plus a 6 plus a 2. So 14 points of base damage. On top of that, I get a +4 for my Mighty Claymore sword, which is one of the best sword items in the game. I happened to roll on that just recently, which is another 4, taking my 14 to an 18. 18 points of damage against these bats, which is going to wipe them out. But how that would work is we'd go to the giant bats, we'd see defense. If there was any defense there, we would take that off the 18. There's not. All 18 points of damage get through. killing all 3 bats. But again, combat is simultaneous, so as they're fighting and dying, they still do get an attack on me, so we'll see if they were able to hit. And they got a 14, which is a hit. These guys are really rolling some low numbers, so they will get a hit on me. And they rolled a 4 and a 7. 7 hits me in the offhand. No bonus modifier. 4 points of damage. They have -3 on their damage, allowing 1 point of damage to get through. And now I have a couple decisions to make because it hit me on the offhand. The offhand doesn't have anything to, block as far as armor. Where these other items would, I would just, whatever the number was on my armor value, I would take it off. And anything else would block that 1 point of damage. But since it hit me on the offhand, I don't have anything there to block it, other than the weapon itself. Any part of armor or weapon can take up to 2 points of damage outside of the armor that it already offers. And you have to shade in these little pips. And that's how the armor that you're carrying and the items that you're carrying over the course of your dungeon run will become damaged over that dungeon run. So I can decide, you know what, I can take that 1 point of damage and just shade in a pip on that claymore, or I can just take that 1 point of damage off my hit points. Now, since it's only 1, and if I didn't have really any other, armor sort of, on me, and maybe since it's only 1 hit point, I probably would just take that hit point and right off, even though, and that's interesting because even though I did that huge hit, 18 points of damage, totally killed the monster. Again, combat is simultaneous. So I did end up getting 1 point of damage, and I would hit, and that would come off me. And then these guys would be dead, and then I would go here and say, okay, what do I get? What is my reward? And it says table P4. So I would go here very quickly. I'd grab table, I'd go to the parts table, boom, click that, comes right up. Parts has 1, 2, 3, 4. I'd grab my dice, I'd roll that for the dungeon. What am I getting for loot? And it comes up as a 99. Wow, okay. 99 part 4 is a scarce. It says roll again and record your find on your adventure sheet with scarce before its name and add plus 200 gold to its value. If you happen to roll uncommon or scarce on the second roll, roll again. So that's a really good part that actually came off of there. But I'm not going to be able to get that because that was just an example. That's probably the best part I've ever rolled, ever playing. And again, you saw it first right here on video. There it is. Okay, that's a simple example of how combat is going to work, and every combat is going to follow exactly what we just did. The only difference is going to be, depending on what you're fighting, they're going to have different abilities, not anything outside of just the few that we do see here on this page. I'm not going to count them all, but you can see there's not too many different abilities that you got to read through to see what you're going to have to be taking on. It just gets kind of difficult sometimes when they stack up those abilities depending on what they are. One of the abilities that can really get you is this dark magic that exists here. That one can get pretty difficult because it gives extra damage as well as defense to the enemy that you're fighting. Okay, right here on the back of the sheet, of the character sheet, you will have areas to store things that you find. These are going to be, weapons and armor up here. This is going to be kind of a simple backpack of things like, your potions, your elixirs, your parts of animals, your, items that you find over the course of play. And then you're going to have a little area here at the very end when you're done. You'll go to town. I'm not going to go through everything that you would do, but you'll go to town. You'll be able to heal up. You'll be able to heal, your disease and your poison that might be on you. You're going to be able to do some different investments that they have here, which is really cool. It's kind of like playing the stock market. It's kind of a fun little mechanic. You can invest in trade, finance, holdings, or wars, and you'll go ahead and you'll roll some dice and you'll see what you come up with, and you might get more, you might actually lose. And that's kind of fun. I don't put too much in there right now because, again, I've only completed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm on my 7th quest. So I don't put too much gold there just yet because I'm trying to really, gear up on the gold to be able to have some nice gold in reserve. So I don't have enough yet to be dabbling in the investment markets. I have put a little bit here in trade, but that's it. And then at the bottom here to tell you how many quests you've completed and what your current quest is, and you'll just mark that there. And then at the beginning of every time that you're going to start a new quest, you'll roll your dice, and if you come up with something that you've put a little check mark next to, then you can pick any quest you want. If you roll one that you have a little X on, it means you failed the quest. At any point in time, you can decide, hey, this quest is too hard, I'm going to die, I'm just going to fail it. And you can just jump out, you will lose half your gold. Well, it's different. Every quest, depending on if you succeed or fail, has something that you'll gain as well. It's usually gold or losing gold. Maybe it's even rep, who knows. And you will be able to fail those quests if you want to. If you roll at the beginning and you get a quest that you failed, you have to do that quest. If you get a check mark, you can pick anyone. If you don't get anything that has a check mark or an X, you will do that quest. Unless you have higher than 1 rep. Every point higher than 1 allows you to roll again and see what would be available from a quest perspective, and then you can kind of choose which quest you want to do. So that's how that questing and how all of these sheets work. We've went over pretty much everything. The only thing that we haven't done is how these rooms work. So let's say that we had already done this room and we were ready. We would decide, now this room, we could move back this way, cost us a time. We could move this way, there's an opening, or we could move forward. And you always want to have it, you always want to turn the sheets to face the way that you decide to move, because that will determine how you draw your map when you get to your map. So let's say we wanted to go this way just for simplicity of not having to move this. What would happen is at the start of a new turn, I would shade a time pip. I then would go here to my map table. So go right in here, right to mapping. All right, and that's got a picture of every map that's available in the game. You'll see right here on the sheet here. And then we would roll. What do we get? We rolled a 64. So we'd find 64. And that is I'll make it bigger here. There's 64, that's a yellow room. And we would draw that on the map exactly like it is right there. And then we would, and this is up to you if you want to use the colored pencils. I think it looks cool. You could just write a Y or a G or for green, or R for red. However you want to do that if you don't have colored pencils or you don't want to buy any. I had some colored pencils laying around, so I thought, it'd be kind of cool, and it just looks visually appealing. So you would draw that room in there. I do draw it with the pencil, and then I overlay it with the yellow, and then kind of fill it in. And then you would move into that room, and then you would start to play and decide, okay, a yellow room isn't an encounter room, so you wouldn't go directly into fighting anything. You would just decide, what do I want to do? You can search in a yellow room, so maybe I would search. This is a dead end, though, which would kind of suck, which means I would actually have to turn around and go back another way. And every time I have to do that, I have to use time. And again, the more time you're in the dungeon, the more oil you're going to burn through, the more food you're going to burn through, and you don't want to run out of those things or you're really going to be in trouble. So just be careful and manage that. Make sure when you're in town between quests to bulk up on flasks of oil, bulk up on food, always have as much food as you possibly can have. And then have that oil, have as much stuff as you can to help you stay alive as long as possible. And I would even invest in those types of things, even over trying to purchase or buying better and better weapons and armor. I would make sure that I keep my stuff always repaired that I have, and look for the drops in the dungeons. I've found that has been my strategy. Pretty much all of this really good stuff that I've got here for my character so far, I have found from chests and loot drops from combats while I was in the dungeon. So that's kind of how I've been playing and how I've been doing that. So that's what I'll say as far as D100 Dungeon is concerned, and this has been just a really light play example of how all the different mechanics of this game work. I would highly recommend it. It's very inexpensive. You can get the PDF for, it's around $11 or $12, and again, that's the route that I took. That way, I've always got my iPad or my phone with me, so I can just grab that and play. I've got all of this that I keep in a little white folder, so I can carry this around very easily. If I was traveling, I probably wouldn't take, obviously I would need the dice, but I probably wouldn't take the, all these little miniatures and whatnot. I do keep a little log as well, where I can kind of record the story that I go through, and that's something that's fun as well, is you can kind of, every quest has its own objectives and things you're supposed to be doing, but you as a player can kind of, follow along with those quests and string them together and create a really fun, fantasy themed story to kind of go along with your adventure, which I think just makes the game that much funner. And it might be even something that you might want to put out on the internet and have people follow along. And I do know people that actually do that, and it's fairly enjoyable. The other things that I would say here, and this is more of some things that I do I do have a really cool house rule that I use for this game, and it comes into the belt check. So if I ever hit a monster while I'm battling them, and I happen to hit them in the belt, in the waist, I do a belt check on them, but I do it a little bit differently. What I do is I grab my percentile dice, and I go to the items table, and I roll, okay? And I see whatever that item is. And what I say is, okay, thematically, I hit them in the waist, and some item fell off their belt, or fell off whatever they had around their waist, and then it fell to the floor. Well, maybe when I hit that item, it broke. Or maybe when it fell to the floor, it broke, and I don't get it. So what I'll then do is I'll take a D6, and I'll roll that D6, and if I ever roll a 1 or a 2, which is a 33% chance, then that item breaks, or slips through the cracks of a floor, if it's coins or whatever. I don't get it. If it's a 3, 4, 5, or 6, I then get that item only if I'm able to defeat that monster at the end of combat. That's just kind of a fun little house rule that I've added to the game. Again, this is my rule. It's not Martin Knight's rule. I've found that it doesn't imbalance the game at all, and it's just a little extra, maybe something here and there. And it's a pretty fun little rule. So that's something that I definitely do. Things that I would like to see in this platform in the future, if there's expansions that are being worked on, I would love to see a crafting mechanic. And I'd like to see this done also very simple. Don't get too advanced with the crafting. Couple items, maybe it's used as a buff on a weapon, maybe it's used to create some elixir that's more powerful than what you can get normally in the game. Just some form of crafting, because there's so many different little monster parts and things that spices and things you come about in the game that don't really have any other use other than you found them and you're going to sell them more than likely in the market. So it'd be cool to see these items be able to be used together in some way to benefit the player. And the other thing I would like to see is a pet system. Some form of a familiar type system where you can either within the dungeon and or in the market purchase different types of pets. And maybe you have 3 or 4 different pets and you can leave them in town like in a kennel, but before you go into each one of the quests, you can choose to take one of them along with you after you determine what your quest is. And maybe those different pets can give you some form of a bonus towards that quest you're going to be doing. Again, I would keep it very, very simple, like a hound that allows you to have maybe better awareness and dexterity. I don't know. Maybe they can kind of, thematically, they're kind of scouting out the dungeon. So it gives you a little bit of bonus when you get into, things where you need to use the ability of aware, just off the top of my head, right? Or maybe you've got a raven that you can take that helps you with something, or some type of little creature that gives you a little bit of a bonus on strength. So it's just keep it very simple, just a little something extra thematically you can bring with you. I think would add a layer of fantasy and a little bit more fun to the game, more fun than it even has today. So again, this is D100 Dungeon. I've had a great time with it. I highly, highly recommend this game. Go get this. It's super cheap, team. I mean, the PDF is like $12, I think. You can get it from Drive-Thru RPG. There is a softcover book as well as a hardcover book. Those are a little bit more expensive, not much more expensive, a little bit. So if you're a book kind of person and you want to have that physical book and that's the route that you want to get the book. If you don't mind and you do a lot of travel, I would highly recommend the PDF. I will say you cannot print the PDF. After you buy it, obviously, you can put that PDF on any device that you would have, but you cannot print the PDF. That's why Martin has offered up the ability to be able to print off some of the main sheets that you need to play from Board Game Geek as well as his website, but you can't just print off the entire PDF. It is locked down. So if you are going to want all of that material in print, you might want to go with the version of this that comes with the soft cover book as well as the PDF. It's only a little bit more expensive than what you would pay just getting the PDF. All right, this has been D100 Dungeon, so hit that like, click the subscribe below to join the team, roll them crits. This has been the McGuire Review, and we'll see you next time. Bear, let's go!